Welcome back. Now is the time for us to take a close look at what the materials look like when you receive them and what a specific unit looks like. When you receive access to the curriculum, you are going to receive a licensed access document, a document that contains a link to this folder. This is the folder for Somos Unit 1. You'll see that there is a subfolder for every unit. You also have an administrative materials start here folder and a supplemental resources folder. In this administrative materials folder, you will find some resources that will help you get started with the program. There's a syllabus if you want it. You can download that and edit it. It lists your AP and IB themes. It gives you a resource map, a scope and sequence. It gives you access to an update log where you can see what updates have been made and when to different units. And it also provides you with a universal screener. So if you're trying to collect data about your students' progress over time, you can administer this screener at least twice or perhaps several times throughout the year, but that's ready to go for you. Back here in the main folder, there's also a supplemental resources folder. This just has some fun things, some little isolated lessons on cultural topics and some forums and other things that'll help you out throughout the year, just give you a little bit more flexibility. And then you have your folders, one for every unit. So we're going to take a look at Somos 1 Unit 15. I talked to you about this briefly earlier, but we'll dig into it more in depth now. In every single unit folder, you will always find 5 files, the same 5 files, plus some additional things. The 5 files that you will find in every unit are a teacher guide, a slideshow, a file with student activity pages, a unit overview, and a bullet planner. We'll look at the teacher guide and the slideshow in a moment and the activity pages. I want to show you first the unit overview. The unit overview is not a file that's going to be useful to you every day, but it's really useful when you need it. So when we open this up, you'll see this is where you'll find the essential questions for the unit. You'll see a list of the core vocabulary. You'll see how it addresses different proficiency benchmarks. What are the standards for this unit? You will see what assessments are included in the unit, and then you'll see a bullet list of all of the activities in the unit aligned to their actual world readiness standards and can-do statements. So whenever you are working on your district scope and sequence, on your vertical alignment, and also when you're writing formal lesson plans, this unit overview will really come in handy. You can make a copy of it to edit it for your own purposes. The bullet planner is another flexible planning tool. This contains a bullet list of all of the activities in the unit. You can make a copy of this and then just use it as a personal planning tool so that you can keep track of where you left off in class each day with every class that you're teaching. So just a tool to help you kind of keep track of where you are in the unit, what you have covered, what you haven't covered, and other notes. So those are kind of your specialized tools, but the main tool that you're going to use in every unit is this file that's going to be titled 01 Teacher Guide. That is the first thing that you should open whenever you open a unit folder, and I would recommend opening it and then printing it. This is a PDF file. Let me open this in a new tab, and I will also open this in a new tab. All right. So in the teacher guide, the first part of the teacher guide is just going to have some, it'll have a table of contents, but then it'll have some generic information that explains what the teacher guide is and how to use it. That's going to be the same in every unit. So read it the first time, maybe the second time, but then you don't need to take the time to read through this in great detail every time you teach a new unit. Here you will find a unit at a glance page. Usually it'll be pages between pages 10 and 12. In the plans, this gives you a bird's eye view of the unit, what you're going to be doing each day. Then you get into your daily plans. Every day is going to have a daily overview page like this that will list the activities. It will tell you what teaching tools you need as the teacher, and it'll tell you what student materials you need. Then you get into the suggested lesson plans, and I know you are going to love these. Different from a standard teacher's edition where you have a copy of the student textbook in the middle, maybe with answers, and you have a few little teaching tips in the side, some suggestions about how you can use the student materials. We give you a ton of support. We tell you exactly what you can do. So we call these our suggested lesson plans because you don't have to do them exactly as we say. But what we find is that teachers usually will follow these lesson plans pretty much exactly as written for the first 1 to 3 years that they're using the program. Then when they're feeling confident, they understand the activities, they understand the goals, they understand their own personalities and preferences, they'll start modifying things. Every day starts with an overview, so you'll see a bullet list of the different things students will be doing, and you'll see a single statement objective. So if you need to post that on the board, it's ready to go for you. Each activity is titled and numbered. So if you're trying to communicate with your colleagues about activities or you're trying to communicate with us because you need support on an activity, it's really easy to do so with these activity numbers. There are gray boxes that provide links to learn more about activities if they are new to you, but you'll see that we also provide pretty in-depth activity descriptions in the curriculum itself. These links are helpful because oftentimes they will include demos. So we have recorded teachers using the activity. So if you learn best by viewing, you can click on those links and find help there. Now, I wanted to show you this unit because I said earlier that we have that three-phase unit. We have established meaning, acquisition through narrative, connections through content. Now, in this unit, Unit 15, the established meaning phase is a little different. Not only are we establishing meaning for words, core vocabulary words, we're also establishing some background knowledge, some content knowledge before we dig into the meat of the unit. And so I wanted to show you this so that you know that not every unit is going to have the exact same flow, even though the overall structure does work out to be the same. Every day starts with a campanada, which is a warm-up activity, a clochette in French. And we just ask, what do you know about Argentina? ¿Qué sabes de Argentina? We tell students with a predictions activity, we tell them you're going to watch a short video. There's a girl, she's going to all these different places. And so they are going to predict on this map. They're going to see here's all the different places she's going to go. And they're going to make predictions about where in Argentina do they think that these places are located. After they've made their predictions, they watch the authentic video and then they compare their predictions to what they actually learned in the video. Then they wrap up the day with a geography reading. So they actually read about, now that they've viewed that video, they read about the geography of Argentina. And as they do, they have a during reading activity where they are marking these places mentioned in the text on this map of Argentina. Now, importantly, when students are reading any text in the curriculum, the goal is not for them to just understand a few words or to get the gist. Because of the scaffolding in the program, students should be able to read this text fluently. They should be reading this article as fluently as they would read an article in their first language. And so you can see that by the second year of Spanish, they have a really robust linguistic system. They can understand a lot in Spanish. The teacher guide, as you'll see, also includes your answer keys. It includes the student materials and the answer keys. The next day, students, it starts out with a shared reading, and you'll see here, anytime that the slideshow is referenced, we tell you exactly where to find it. So it says, read about Tango students using the projectable text slides 12 through 17. So we pop over here to the slideshow. We go to slides 12, voila, here's this, so you can project it and read it together with your students. There is a video that's embedded. We give you two different options. So there's one song that they're listening to. There's a video where there's people dancing tango. Tango, of course, is a fairly sensual dance. So if you're like, oh, it's a little too sensual for my district, it's an appropriate video. It's just by nature, tangos, that's what it is. Then we have the song only, a lyrics video. So we provide both of those options for you and some guidance to help you think through choosing things for your context. You're the expert. It falls on you to make those decisions, but we want to help you along the way. Then they do a scrambled lyrics activity. So continuing to engage with this authentic resource, that's a song where they get the lyrics out of order. It looks like this, and they have to cut them up and put them in the correct order. We provide resources so that if you're doing that shared reading, if you read this text together in class, but you have students who are absent or need accommodations, there's a printed version of the article that's ready to go for them. After they do the song lyrics, they read the biography of the song artist, and then they take a close look at the lyrics, at the chorus from the song here. So it's sé que tú me miras a los ojos y es algo único, sé que yo siempre quiero más. And then one way that we address grammar is through an activity called horizontal conjugation. That's what we do here, where you are just rewriting this hook from the opposite perspective. So instead of saying sé que tú me miras a los ojos, they would change it to sabes que yo te miro a los ojos. And you walk them through that so that they're thinking about conjugation in a more holistic, communicative way. Day 3, we get into your more traditional established meaning where we introduce the core vocabulary. We tell students, hey, here's the keywords for the unit: vive solo, trabaja en, and necesitan. The slide for that here, there's a vocabulary slide ready for you to go. They have the chance to see some of those words in context in short sentences. And then we give students a family survey. We ask them some questions. Here it says TG 36. So we go to TG 36. Here we go. How many people live in your house? How many adults? How many kids? They complete that survey, and then you have the chance to discuss it. Now, again, whenever you're talking with students about their lives, there's some things that you might have to think about. Are students going to be comfortable sharing this information? Is it appropriate for students to share this information? So we provide some guidance to you to think through those questions. What are some options that you can give your students, some alternatives, so that everyone feels comfortable engaging in this activity? Let them know, hey, you don't have to respond truthfully, or you don't have to answer all the questions, or you can answer the questions, but you don't have to share your answers. Depending on how you engage with that survey, your next steps will vary. The next day, we take time to introduce voceo. Because voceo would be the most natural way to communicate in Argentina, we want to use it throughout the unit, but if it's unfamiliar to students, they need some support. So we start with a shared reading about, even before we go to the shared reading about voceo, students dig into a graph. There's a graph here that shows survey results from not your class, but a different class. And so this is not an authentic resource, but it's going to mirror the kind of an authentic resource that students might encounter as they get into AP classes, interpreting graphs that are in the target language. This was a graph that was created for language learners, so it's not an authentic resource, but it is structured like an authentic resource. Your administrators will often love this because it's addressing some of those other content area standards. You've got those cross-content connections with math and science. Then they're going to read about voceo. So slides 41 through 49. Here we go. They read about voceo. They compare tuteo and voceo. And then we want to try it. So we have this activity called Movete Si. It's a huge game show file. So here we just have it linked from the slideshow, but you can also find it right here in the unit. It says Day 4 Movete Si file. This is a game that you might have played in professional learning sometime, where everyone is seated in a circle. One person's in the middle and they make a statement about themselves, and anyone in the circle for which that statement is also true tries to switch places, and you try not to be the last one standing. Now, in this activity, we're using voceo as we do it, but we know students probably aren't comfortable communicating with it yet, so we model the statements for them. So we ask the questions. So one student's in the middle of the circle, we ask, ¿vivís con 3 o más animales? If they say yes, this would be clickable in the view only. There we go. Then it says move yourself if you live with three or more animals. So anyone that lives with three or more animals would move. So this will get them some repeated exposure to voceo so that they can feel comfortable interpreting it. After that activity, we have a partner activity that we also provide as a worksheet version in case you're like, okay, my students have had enough movement for the day. I don't want them in partners. We have a worksheet version where they are matching questions and answers here. So these cards, you print them out, you cut them up, and they're just asking it matching questions and answers. And the worksheet version looks like this. The next day, we get into our actual story. So TPRS is our core story activity. It's used in almost every unit. We provide some alternatives to story asking if you're not comfortable with it. But that's day 4. So we're creating that story. We provide the script with tuteo if you want to use dialogue with tuteo. And we also provide it with voceo if you would rather use the voceo form. We also provide a story if you don't want to create your own class story. You have a story ready to go that you can read or distribute to your students with some activities so they can still get the benefit of that acquisition through narrative without using TPRS. Then we have some post-story asking activities, some activities where students will work with the narrative in different ways to help them just enjoy the story, but also to move into different modes of communication. So pencil grab is a listening activity where they're listening to true false statements. Before and after is a speaking activity where they are going around and saying one scene from the story and their classmates have to say what came before or after it. And then they're writing a summary of the story using the structure shrinking summary. There's also a blind retell activity where they are retelling it orally, trying to do it perfectly, and then an activity where they analyze the story elements, the character, the plot, the setting. So again, more cross-content connections. This will really connect with your English classes, your language arts classes. And of course, all of those activities are written out in great detail, with references to slides and worksheets in the teacher's guide, everything that you need. Here's an example of what our activity instructions looks like. So for every activity in the curriculum, we do provide one of these activity instructions pages so that you can read about it. And then you can follow the links in those gray boxes or, for example, here to learn more and perhaps see demos. All right. Moving out of the acquisition through narrative phase, it's time to jump into connections through content. The first thing that we do is this warm up. So we're trying to connect to background knowledge. We say, describe the typical cowboy or vaquero estadounidense. Where do they live? What do they wear? What do they do? What do they eat? What are their personalities like? What possessions do they have? And then after establishing that background knowledge, we connect it to the gaucho so that students can kind of have a context for what a gaucho is before they get into it. The shared reading, it says slides 66 through 80. Here we go. This includes some, we call it rebobina, but some like a rewind activity where it'll share a little bit of information, then ask a processing question to help students attend to what's a longer text as you're reading it together. They're going to watch a short video and answer some discussion questions. And then they will read a little bit more in depth about gauchos independently, and then have a speaking activity where they will highlight some different facts from a text and share them with classmates. So it's a speaking activity, but with scaffolding so that they can still be using accurate language. And finally, some discussion. So here's the original text, an additional short text that accompanies the authentic resource, and then on to day 9. Now, these lesson plans are written for 45-minute lesson periods. You may find that they take longer or shorter, even if your class periods are 45 minutes. If you teach on a block, no problem. You can probably plan to get through about 1.5 days worth of lessons in each block period. Day 9 is really fun. It starts out with this upside down drawing activity. This is an activity, what page? Slide 88, where Students will be drawing something and guessing, what do you see? What's it going to be? Slowly, as the picture is revealed, they're drawing it upside down. And at the end, when they flip it right side up, they'll see, what is that? Looks like a teacup maybe with a kettle. And then we jump into a shared reading about mate. So the kids will learn about mate through a shared reading. Um, Today they do a reading activity where they compare two versions of a text, one that is shorter and less detailed with one that is more detailed, and they identify what information is contained in the second text that is not included in the first one. So some critical reading. You'll find that students are really building literacy in as they acquire language through this program, and that many of those literacy skills that they're working on are going to transfer to reading in their first language. The next day, we continue talking about mate. Students are going to view an authentic video talking about how to make a good mate, but there's a lot of vocabulary in that video that makes it hard to understand. So before we do, we do a previewing vocabulary activity. And then after we play, we've taken the time to introduce words, they've watched the video, we don't want to just let it go. So we give them more exposure to the words through an activity called sentence bingo. So they will have repeated exposure to all of the different vocabulary related to preparing mate. And we have all of the sentence bingo activities here in the unit folder. Sorry, I did that fast. This bingo materials, it'll explain where to find those in the teacher's guide, but you've got call cards, you've got printable game supplies, and you have paperless bingo boards in case you don't want to print out the boards to use. Day 11, we're getting to the end. We have a reading assessment. All of our assessments are standards-based, which means we are looking at to what extent can students read and understand, listen and understand how complex is their writing and how complex is their speech. The assessments are short. They do not look like unit tests, but they are sufficient to help you evaluate students' performance in reference to their proficiency. So as you can see here, they're reading a short story. They're answering questions in English about the story so we can really look at their comprehension, not conflating their comprehension with what they're able to write, which is what would happen if the questions were in Spanish. And then that is evaluated with reference to a rubric, and we give you not only the answer key, but a grading guide to help you know how to use that rubric. Also on this day, students are just doing a fun little glyph activity where they're answering personalized questions. So here, do you prefer to drink something hot or something cold? And then they color this picture of a mate gourd based on the answers to their questions. So not only is it just kind of a relaxing way to wrap up the unit, but it's also giving you an opportunity to create those connections between students, compare their answers, because all of them are going to end up with pictures that are colored slightly different based on their responses. On the last day here, we provide some suggestions for teachers. You don't need to dig into this unit, but if you're really looking to dig more into the perspectives, there's an additional day here. They begin with what's called card talk, where they draw their answer to a question on a piece of paper. In this case, they on one side draw a person, a symbol, or a figure that represents their culture. And then on the other side, the image of a person or figure or symbol that represents them as an individual. And then we talk about the difference between how sometimes things that represent our culture don't actually represent us as individuals. And so we use that to talk about gauchos. So how is it that gauchos represent Argentina? Or just because gauchos have become a national symbol of Argentina, it doesn't mean that the gaucho represents every Argentine person. And then similarly, we learn about gaucho culture in Uruguay and how that's celebrated. And we talk about how just because something is stereotypical of or characteristic of one culture doesn't mean that it is only specific to that culture. So in the case of the gaucho, it is a symbol of Argentina, a national symbol of Argentina, but gauchos are part of several different cultures in South America. All right. So with that, I hope you can see how everything that you need for teaching this unit is right here, digital files. As I mentioned, we do have printable versions of workbooks that are ready to go for you if you feel less comfortable navigating only the digital files, and your district coordinator can navigate those purchases. If there are any questions that you have after viewing this video, please collate them as a district and then send them over. We would love to help you get those questions answered so that you can decide what your best steps are moving forward.